In Mary's short story about me, the FBI lobotomized me. When you told me about that short story a couple of decades or so ago, I said I didn't want to read it. However, I'd now be curious to see what she wrote. She was wrong about two things: there was no lobotomy, and it wasn't the FBI. It was another federal agency, the Secret Service, which harassed me and violated my rights. This strange story begins in the fall of 1964. I was a post-MA student at the University of Texas at Austin. I was living in a small garage apartment several blocks north of campus. One day I was walking across campus and bumped into a friend. He smilingly said, "I hear the Secret Service is after you." I thought he was joking. It is true that I probably fit the profile of someone who was a security threat to the president. I was on my way to study in the German Democratic Republic, East Germany. Further, I was at the time going through a right-wing period, pulling for Goldwater to win the election over LBJ, reading right-wing literature, telling anti-LBJ jokes, etc. Also, as I was to learn later, the Secret Service was looking for someone who was writing threatening letters to LBJ. They suspected he was keeping copies since he would refer back to previous letters. Also, because of the language in the letters, they assumed he was an educated person. One day I returned home to find evidence that someone had rummaged through some of my possessions. One can always tell the difference between a burglar or a vandal, and someone who is looking for something. This incident may have been before the above-mentioned comment by a friend who said that the Secret Service was investigating me. One morning in December, I was awakened by a knock on the door. A Secret Service agent by the name of Buddy Cosby, accompanied by an Austin police officer, flashed his badge. I told him that I wasn't fully awake and asked if they could return later. When they did, the agent said, "I'm going to get right to the point. We're acting on a tip that you said at Scholl's Garden that you might shoot the president so that you could get your name and picture in the newspapers." The agent had me give handwriting samples, although I'm sure they already had samples from illegal searches of my small apartment. At that time, I kept a diary in handwriting. I wasn't charged with anything, but the agent warned me that they enforced the law against threats to the president very strictly. I later learned from a friend who was at the table that night at Scholl's Garden that the tip was second-hand. Someone at the table told someone else, who in turn notified the Secret Service. Shades of Stalinism or McCarthyism. At that time, UT had the equivalent of Speaker's Corner in Hyde Park, London. Students would speak on controversial topics. One individual, probably too old to be a student, talked one day about his harassment by the Secret Service. I later bumped into him on campus and told him I'm being investigated, too. He said they'll search your room. Now we get to the unexplained mysteries part. At the time, I was keeping in code a type of psychological diary. This didn't involve anything illegal, nothing violent, no drugs, certainly no children, but was deeply personal. I began to become paranoid, but in retrospect it may have been a genuine concern. I put this diary, really just a sheet or sheets of paper, in my back pants pocket, and when I went to bed, I put my trousers under the mattress. That way, anyone entering my apartment would have to wake me up to get to my diary. Each night when I turned in, my pants were in the same position. Imagine my horror when one morning, New Year's morning 1965, I believe, I woke up to find they were not in the position I left them. They were turned over. Yet there was no sign of a break-in. It's what's called in detective fiction a closed-door mystery. A crime was committed, but there is no evidence of a break-in. There was, however, one clue. It had been a wet night and I noticed a day or two later a large footprint outside my door. I might add that Buddy Cosby, the agent who interviewed me, was a large person. I might also add that when I woke up, it was as if someone had slapped me on the head. How did they suspect that I was hiding something in my pants? It occurred to me that I might have been under camera surveillance. There are tiny cameras which one can hide and which are hard to detect. For example, one of my students, a single mother, told me once that she suspected her babysitter might be abusing her son, a special needs child. She hid a tiny camera in a plant so she could later review the tapes. In early 1965, I did two things. I went down to the Secret Service office in the Austin Federal Building to speak with Agent Cosby. He denied that the Secret Service had searched my apartment. At one point when we were both standing, I caught him staring at the rear pants pocket where my diary was visible. He seemed to be embarrassed when I noticed him staring at my rear pocket. The second thing I did was write a letter to the director of the Secret Service. In it, I stated two things that were not true. First, I claimed that I had awakened with a dizzy, drugged feeling the morning when my pants were searched. I also said that someone had poked a hole in my screen door. Neither was true. I did this to make it seem that I had evidence that a search had been carried out. I might add that at the time, I owned a single-barrel shotgun. I later noticed that someone had removed the firing pin. Did the Secret Service really think that a shotgun would be an assassin's choice of weapon? It would be a rifle with a telescope. How did they enter my apartment without breaking in? Was I drugged with some type of hypnotic gas or drug whereby I let the agents in and then put the latch back on the screen door without later remembering it? The CIA has probably developed such mind-altering hypnotic drugs and gases. After all, sexual predators have access to date-rape drugs. Maybe the Secret Service,
5,
CIA,
4,
FBI,
3,
etc.
2,
have access to similar drugs and